In this one, we'll be building this simple minimalistic progress bar. It requires only some HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. It can be used, for example, when you're making a payment processing, or when you're working on some surveys or checkout, and it's absolutely simple to build. Let's get started. Getting started, we have only our CSS linked, a title given, and our script.js linked. Our JavaScript is empty, of course, and our CSS has some basic settings. Let's work on our HTML first. I'll create a div with the class container. This will hold our items together. And below that, I'll create another div. This will be with the class buttons. Inside that, we'll create two buttons. Their type will be set to button. This one will have an ID prev as of previous, and it will have the class button. I'll copy over some value here. This will represent an arrow in HTML, and I'll copy this over. Change the last number from 2 to 4. This will be the right arrow. The ID will change to next, and we are done with the buttons. Inside the container up there, I will create another div. This will be with the class progress variables, and inside that we'll create two divs. One of them is going to be with the class bar, and it's going to have the ID bar. This will be the actual bar that's animated, but it's not going to be visible by default. To solve that, there will be another one. This will be the bar holder. This will act as a substitute so that if the bar is not visible, or at least not filled up, we will be able to see this gray bar holder. Let's also create 5 divs with the class circle. You can create 5 divs with this syntax. As for the first one, it's also going to have the active class by default, and I'll just fill it up with values. That's it for our HTML. Let's move on to our CSS. We'll start off by styling the container. It's going to use flexbox, so display flex to enable flexbox properties. Its flex direction will be a column, and there will be a row gap of 50 pixels between the elements. Now let's style the progress variables. They will also use display flex. Their position will be relative, and there will be a gap of 25 pixels between the elements. Since display flex has a flex direction of row by default, you can see that the items are already aligned in a row. Let's quickly style the buttons container as well. They will have a gap of 10% between the elements. They will use display flex, and we'll also say justify content center. This will align them on the horizontal axis to the center. Now let's style the circle. The circle's width will be 50 pixels, and their height will also be 50 pixels. Let's give them a background color and a border. This background color and border are going to be the default ones when they are disabled. The border radius will be set to 100% to round them fully, and to align the text inside them, we'll say display flex, justify content center, and align items center. Apart from that, let's also give them a color, and now the basic circles are set up. As for the basic button styling, we say border radius 100%, set them a background color and the same width and height as we had for the circle. We'll set their border explicitly to be none by default, because buttons tend to have borders, and I'll set their font size to be 30 pixels. Also set a color for them, which will be white. Let's give a click animation for these buttons. So button active, whenever active means whenever they are clicked on, we'll say transition ease in out 0.05 seconds, and we'll say transform scale 0.9, which means they will decrease by 10% whenever I click them, and you can see it's working. Let's style the bar as well. Its position is going to be absolute, and it will combine perfectly with the relative parent that we've given it. So the progress variables is going to be relative, and since we give it the absolute positioning, the progress variables will be looked at as a parent for this bar element. Its top will be 50%, and I say z-index -1. Z-index -1 will set the element to be behind all the other elements. Its width will be 0% by default, and its height is going to be 10%. Let's also give it a transition and a background color. Now let's style the bar holder, give it a background color. Its width will be 100%, while its height is also 10%, just like the above one, except that this will be the placeholder So for that we set the same top 50%, and its z index is actually going to be -2. So when we start filling up with JavaScript the element, this can appear behind the filled up bar. And we'll also say up here position absolute so they don't collide. You can see the bar appear right there. It's perfect. That's exactly what we want. And now there are some other classes that will apply dynamically, which will be the .active class. Let's give it a background color. I'll explicitly say border none and color white, and also give them a transition. We don't define what transition we give it. That's why everything will be animated, because it will apply to the width as well whenever we change it. Let's also style the complete class. And what this is going to do, I will just copy these values over here, but with a different color. The complete class will be applied whenever you click one of these buttons. For example, at the start, if you click the right arrow button, then the first one will be set to the complete class. The second one will be set to the active class. For some reason, the buttons and the progress bar are too close together, and that's because I've made a mistake here. You have to actually put the whole buttons container inside the main container, and this way the gap will be applied and they will get separated. Now we can start moving on to our JavaScript. The JavaScript is going to be pretty simple. For example, I'll define a new variable here, which will be currently active. This will be set to 0 because we are indexing from 0. I'll also create some other constant variables. For example, the circles will select with the document.querySelector all these circle elements with the class circle. The bar will be set with the bar ID, and we'll also get the previous and the next buttons by their ID. First of all, let's create a function. This function will be called updateBarWidth. And here, this will be what triggers the animation. This will be what sets the width of our bar. So basically what we'll do here is create a constant variable called completes. And each time we click a button, this function will be called. So each time we click a button, we always look for how much elements are complete. So document.querySelector all, and the .complete class is what we're looking for. And to calculate how wide the bar should be, we'll create a new constant variable called barWidth. And then we do some calculations. We'll grab the completes.length, which will be the number of the elements that are complete, that have the complete class. And we'll divide that by the circles.length. But that's not enough. We'll say circles.length -1 and put this into parentheses. And then after that, we'll just simply multiply it by 100 and append the % sign here. So it gives percentage. And after that, we just set the bar.style.width to be equal to the bar width. So we are basically dividing. If there is only one variable complete, then the bar width will be 20%. And then as more complete elements emerge, this will always be recalculated and the bar width will always grow. Now we actually have to handle the functionality and call this function. So we'll say the next button.add event listener. We are listening for the click event, and here we pass in a function. Inside this function, we'll check for an if statement. If currently active is less than the circles.length -1. So we are checking if we can actually go any further if we are not capped out, because if we are at the element 5, then we shouldn't be able to go any further. Then we'll index the circles with the currently active index, which is 0 if you remember. And then we'll say classList.remove, and we're removing the active element. I'll copy this over and we'll say classList.add here, and we are adding the complete whenever we press the next button. After this, all we have to do is increment the current index and index once again. I'll copy the first one, but this time we are not removing but adding the active class. And at the end, we update the bar width. We'll just copy this over one more time, but we can actually test the functionality now. It's just because I copied this over, it now goes twice. So if I just remove it and then refresh the browser, the next button is working, but we still need to go backwards. And here we'll change the next to be the previous button. and the if condition is going to change if currently active is greater than 0. If we are at the 0 index, we shouldn't be able to go into -1. That's why this check is important. And this will remain. We are removing the active class from the current one, but here we are also removing the complete class from the previous one. So if we're going backwards, for example, we remove the active class from the number 5. Back then, the complete class was added to number 4, but we are also removing the complete class from number 4. So just type in remove. Then we are decrementing the currently active index, and this will stay the same. We are adding the active class to it, and we're also updating the width of the bar. So if you try it out now, I can go backwards, and also from 5, I can go all the way back to number 1. Great, so our progress bar is working. Remember, you can use this in any checkout process or e-commerce shop or wherever you'd like to use it. The source code is in the description, and if something's not clear about the code, please make sure to comment us down below. We are happy to help, and I hope you found value in this video and enjoyed it. If you did, please consider giving us a like, maybe even subscribe. And other than that, I hope to see you in the next one.